What if I told you that one of the greatest victories of World War II didn't come from a battlefield, but from a lie? Not a little white lie, but a careful crafted deception involving a dead body, a fake identity, and document designed to fool Hitler himself. Sounds like the plot of a spy movie, right? Well, this one actually happened. So, take a seat, because here comes history. World War II was full of epic battles, heroic resistance, and tragic loss. But hidden beneath the gunfire and chaos was another war. A war of minds, a war of manipulation, a war where lies were carefully crafted to save lives. Today we are diving into one of the boldest, strangest, and the smartest deceptions of the entire war, Operation Mincemeat. It's the true story of how a dead man fooled Hitler. The problem. In 1943, the Allies had a big problem. They needed to invade southern Europe, and the obvious target was Sicily, the island just off the coast of Italy. But Hitler and his generals weren't stupid. They knew Sicily was the logical choice. So, they heavily fortified the island. Defenses were up, troops were ready. If the Allies attacked, it would be a bloodbath. The Allies couldn't afford that kind of loss. They needed an element of surprise, something that would draw enemy forces away from their real landing point. But how do you make your enemy believe you will show up in a completely different place? That's when British intelligence officers got creative. They knew that Hitler had a tendency to overanalyze information. If they could feed him a believable narrative, something he wanted to believe, they might have a choice. The solution would be found in brute force. It had to be psychological. The mission wasn't just about misleading soldiers, it was about deceiving an entire military intelligence system. So the British came up with a wild idea. What if we could make Hitler believe we were going somewhere else? The strangest plan ever. Enter Operation Mincemeat. The goal was simple: convince the Nazis that the Allies were going to invade Greece and Sardinia, not Sicily. This wasn't just a random guess. Greece made strategic sense. It had ports, terrain for land troops, and was already under Axis control. Sardinia, being another Mediterranean island, was a believable secondary target. Together they made a compelling alternative to Sicily. But how could this lie be delivered convincingly? That's where the strange part came in. The British decided to use a dead body as their messenger. The plan was to create a fictional military officer, make it seem like he had died in a plane crash while carrying sensitive documents, and then allow that body to be discovered by Axis-friendly forces. Every detail had to be flawless. And not only did the documents need to look real, they had to feel real. They needed to seem like something a busy officer might actually be carrying. Casual, urgent, plausible. And most of all, they needed to land where the Nazis could find them, without looking like a setup. Finding the right corpse. The British need a body, not just any body. It had to look like a real British officer who had died in a plane crash at sea. This was one of the trickiest parts of the operation. The body couldn't be obviously murdered or injured. It had to look like someone who drowned, possibly in an accident. It also had to be fresh enough to be convincing, but not so fresh as to draw suspicion. Eventually, they found one, Glyndwr Michael, a homeless Welshman who had died from ingesting rat poison. He had no close family, no known connections, and no one to claim his body. He was a man who had lived in obscurity, but his death gave him a new identity. Major William Martin, of the Royal Marines. They crafted every inch of this new identity. His uniform was perfect, down to the buttons and insignia. They filled his pockets with personal effects. love letters from a fake fiancé named Pen, a used theater ticket, a hotel bill, even a bank overdraft notice. All tiny details designed to sell the illusion. And of course, there was the briefcase. Inside were official looking documents suggesting an allied plan to invade Greece. They even made sure to include misleading code words, signatures, and a believable route of travel. The body goes to war. On April 1943, the body was released from a British submarine off the coast of Huelva, Spain. This location wasn't chosen by chance. Spain, while officially neutral, was heavily influenced by Nazi Germany. German agents operated in the country freely, and British intelligence was fairly certain that anything recovered by Spanish authorities would eventually end up in German hands. And just as hoped, the body was discovered. Spanish fishermen brought it to shore, and local officials treated the case with curiosity and discretion. British diplomats even pretended to be alarmed by the discovery, asking for the return of the sensitive documents. That fake urgency made it all seem more real. Behind the scenes, British codebreakers intercepted messages showing that Germans were indeed analyzing the documents and taking them seriously. It was working. The bait is taken. Hitler was convinced. He ordered troops to move to Greece and the Balkans, leaving Sicily vulnerable. The Germans' high command believed they had intercepted a true piece of Allied planning. In fact, they were so confident in the documents that they began diverting Panzer divisions, air squadrons, and naval units away from Sicily, just as the Allies had hoped. Even when Allied forces landed in Sicily on July 10th, German reaction was sluggish. Hitler remained convinced that Sicily was a feint. He believed that the real invasion was coming later, in Greece, and that Sicily was just a diversion. That delay gave the Allies a critical advantage. The invasion of Sicily was a success, and far fewer soldiers died than originally feared. Crazy, right? A whole army fooled by one fake identity and a handful of documents. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think this kind of plan would still work today, in the age of satellites and AI? Or was this a once in a history kind of trick? And if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unbelievable true stories like this one. The man who never was. The body, Major Martin, was buried with full military honors in Spain. His gravestone still stands in Huelva to this day. It honors a man who never existed, but helped change the course of history. For years, the true identity behind the operation remained secret. It wasn't until after the war, and later into the 1950s, that the British government declassified details about Operation Mincemeat. Eventually, it was revealed that the man behind the identity was Glinder Michael, a man whose life ended in sadness obscurity. He was an unknown man whose death, through an unbelievable turn of events, helped quietly shift the direction of the war. He became known as the man who never was. His story has since inspired books, documentaries, and even films. Why it worked. But here's the big question. Why did it work? How could one body and a few forged papers fool one of the most powerful armies in the world? The answer lies in human psychology. Hitler and his generals were already worried about an attack in Greece. The forged documents simply confirmed what they already suspected, and when people see evidence that aligns with their fears or beliefs, they're more likely to trust it without question. This phenomenon is called confirmation bias, and it's incredibly powerful. The Nazis didn't want to believe they'd been tricked. They thought they had intercepted a gold mine of intelligence. It also worth nothing that the documents were careful writing to avoid any red flags. They were vague enough to seem realistic, but detailed enough to sound authentic. The power of propaganda. This wasn't the only time fake news was used in World War II. All sides used posters, leaflets, fake broadcasters, and rumors to confuse and demoralize the enemy. Propaganda became as much as weapons as guns and tanks. It shaped morale, spread fear, and stirred hatred. Operation Mincemeat stood out because it was so bizarre, and because it worked so perfectly. But other operations also relied on trickery. The Allies created fake armies, inflatable tanks, and radio chatter to convince the Nazis they were amassing troops in places where none existed. These tactics played a key role again during D-Day. Operation Mincemeat proved that lies, when crafted with care, can become lethal tools in the hands of clever minds. Modern connections. You might be thinking, that was then. Things are different now. But are they? Today, wars aren't just fought with bullets and bombs. They are fought with data, media, and influence. We live in an age of digital deception. Fake news, deepfakes, manipulated videos, and AI generated propaganda. The battlefield has moved online, and the same psychological tactics apply. People are still easily convinced by stories that match their hopes or expectations. Emotional triggers and targeted misinformation campaigns have become modern tools of influence, used by governments, corporations, and even individuals. Operation Mincemeat is more than just a war story. It's a warning. It shows us how vulnerable we can be, not just to lies, but to the lies we want to be true. One dead man, one suitcase of lies, one perfectly timed deception. Operation Mincemeat wasn't just clever, it was brilliantly human. It played on fear, hope, and the natural tendency to believe what we want to believe. And in the middle of the world's deadliest war, it turned the tide, with nothing but a story. If this story blew your mind like it did mine, let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories where a story is stranger than fiction, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I've got plenty more where this came from. Thanks for watching.